Let's start. Thank you so much. Welcome to our session on choosing the right ISO for cloud, privacy, and AI. Today, we will walk through each topic in a structured flow, and towards the end, we'll have a dedicated time for question and answer. If anyone needs a clarification at any point of time to presentation, so feel free to drop your questions in the chat. I'm more than happy to answer those one. Once again, thank you so much for joining. Um, who is Accorian? We are the global cybersecurity firm serving organizations across many industries and regions. We help business strategies and we also strengthen the overall security posture through compliance readiness, audit execution, penetration testing, and strategic consulting as well. You also might get surprised. We are also one of the only 10 accredited companies in-house capability to deliver both audit and technical testing services as well. So we bring a strong security strategies and coming back to our team strength, we are a team of more than 175 security specialists and experience completing over more than 1,000 assessment as well. So moving ahead, a small intro about me. So I will be your host. I have close to around 15 years of experience in cybersecurity. Currently, I work as Vice President and Head of Security Compliance in Accorian, and I'm also a proud member of Standard Council of Canada as well. So that's a small intro about me. And moving ahead about today's agenda. Sorry about it. So in this section, we'll explore the first and foremost, let's understand why, what, and how behind the ISO standard, because most of them have the confusions about how the ISO is published and what are the changes, what is the review cycle standpoint. And the most importantly, we'll explore the strategic importance of key ISO standards and a framework to help decide which ISO certification or the guideline best fit for your organization needs. By the end of this session, so you should clearly understand the ISO standard sense for you and why they matter and when to adopt them as part of your organization maturity journey as well. And moving ahead, so let's focus deep dive on understanding why, what, and how behind ISO standard. So before we look at the specific standard, it's always important to understand why ISO exists. So ISO actually is how these standards are being created and when they get updated, replaced. This gives a complete foundation. So let's start with the why. So first and foremost, ISO is not a mandatory standard. ISO standards are not legally binded in any of the way. And then why people talk more about the ISO? It is the one of the standard. It has a very the actual benefit is that ISO gives a consistent, repeatable, and also the measurable management system. So that why is simple and ISO built a complete trust and the structure standpoint. So that's why people always prefer to go for ISO standard, and it is also the global standard. Who owns the which country owns the ISO standard? So this is the biggest question, most of them, asking me about it. ISO isn't owned by any one country. It is built through the contribution from more than 160 plus member nation developed by experts and regulators and also the industry experts as well when it comes to updating the standard as well. So whenever ISO updates or any change in a clause, it goes through the complete approval process. For example, in other words, it's a proper formal process starting from the draft, review, national voting, and then the final approval goes on it. This and also the 160 plus the nations wide the people will participation will be there. This is a global participation. That's why ISO is seen as a neutral standard and universally and globally recognized as well. And also the one of the negative about it, it's a time consuming because it's not that one or two person will approve it. It takes around the committee members should give the approval for this. So every ISO standard goes through the development life cycle. When I say development cycle, so before the publication, it goes through the multiple formal stages like CD, which is called committee draft. Then it goes with the draft international standard. Then FDIS, it's the formal approval, which also goes as the final distribution, and finally the standard would be released actually. So again, to release any standard, each country will, you should have the enough countries to vote it as yes. That's the most important before the release about it. So let's take an example of ISO 27018, which is recently published. It reached the stage where 60 is to 60 means every vote passed and it was approved by the global release. So that's when the actual standard will get published as well. And one more surprising when I was discussing with my customers, they were asking me, Kiran, I understand that why ISO 27001 took almost 9 years for to release the standard. Well, actually, there is a life cycle where ISO has come up with a procedure that every 5 years, every standard will automatically go for the review cycle. So in that way, where each and every committee members will look at that how's can it be remain the same or it needs to be revised or it can be withdrawn as well. So when it comes to 27,001 perspective on in 2018, the review cycle initiated, but unfortunately, when the review needs to be updated, when the commit was that in 2019, the COVID was the biggest hit, and that caused a major delay. And explicitly, the voting and the meetings which were supposed to happen, it didn't happen. So that's one of the reason why 27,001 caused a major delay pertaining to the release of the standard. In simple terms, so every standard goes to the review cycle and it has to be approved by the committee members. And that's the entire cycle as well. And one important key point is that if the committee feels that this particular standard to be withdrawn, or if it is not relevant to the current environment, so the standard would be taken out as well. So that's the whole cycle about why, what, and the exact process about ISO standard. Moving next about the ISO standard, what are the strategic importance of the ISO standard? When it comes to strategic importance, adopting ISO standard provides us several key benefits. It gives you the global trust, risk alignment, and also the compliance defense as well. Achieving an ISO standard such as ISO 27001 signals global that your security and the privacy practice are vetted against the best practices as well. Risk alignment, it ensures that you're not just ticking the box, but truly align the security measures to address risk in your business as well. Compliance these days you might have come across EU side the GDPR, the US side CCPA, and upcoming EU AI Act when it comes to artificial intelligence. So ISO standard definitely can help and demonstrate the due diligence for these laws as well. Compared to all these ones, so that's one of the reason why the ISO standard has been preferred. So let's get into the deep dive about these standards particularly. And before we diving into the specific standard, the fundamental question for any security expert is that the three questions you need to ask about yourself and with your team members as well. The first and foremost it is what can we operationalize when it comes to our day-to-day activity as part of the security and the compliance team. You should understand what we can operationalize. The second, what are we exposed to? And third, the most important is that what are we protecting? These three are the most important questions to be asked internally before you select any standard. So now, coming back to what can we operationalize is basically the action against it. So focus on the action and practice. It's like asking which control or the process from the standard we can realistically implement given our environment. That's the most important. You need to ask with your team that what I need to operationalize. Then the next comes is the exposure standpoint. Identify the risk areas. That is also the most important. In generally, if you look at any standard, there is annual activity that you need to perform the risk assessment as well. Before you perform the risk assessment, what we recommend is that identify your risk areas or the compliance gap. Like different industries and technology exposes organization different threats. So let's take an example of the cloud standpoint, cloud misconfiguration or the data breach in the privacy, or in the AI standpoint, the model biases as well. So you need to understand what is exposed. That's the most important. And then finally, what are we protecting? So always remember that assets at stake, the customer data, critical data. So most importantly, instead of focusing on the customer first, you make sure you internal data, whatever your internal data, focus on it. Of course, the customer data is very critical. You need to protect that one. But first, you identify your assets, which is supporting the customer data as well. So protect your current assets and which they hold the value of it. So by keeping these questions in mind, you can better align choosing the standard to your actual needs. So let's deep dive into the particular standard. For example, 27017, it is a cloud security standard, and 27018, it's a cloud privacy explicitly for the PI protection standpoint. 27701, it's a privacy information management standard. And these all three standards are the extension of 27001, whereas ISO 42001, it's a standalone. But if you look at all these standards as well, these are all the extraction of 27001 when it comes to the control stack. So let's focus on 27017, what it is. So 27017 is an extension of 27001, specifically 27002, because the cloud security controls would be discussed in 27017 more in detail. It provides a guidance for both cloud service provider and also for the customers on securing the cloud environment. So why it matters a lot? For example, in the cloud environment, introduce the unique risk as well, notably the shared responsibility between the providers and the customer standpoint. So that helps in the ISO 27017. It really clarifies these responsibility and addresses the cloud specific threats as well. So the biggest cloud security risk is often the misconfiguration. So due to the unclear responsibility. So 27017 helps about the complete shared responsibility. Now, moving ahead on 27018 and 27701, it's a privacy extension of ISO 27001. So what they are, 27018 focus pertaining to the PI data, which is in the cloud environment, as essentially providing the privacy control for cloud service providers handling the PI information. Whereas 27701 provides a framework to manage the personal data privacy in general, mapping the regulations like GDPR. And in short, 27018 is code of practice. 27701 is a certifiable standard, but again, it's more about privacy across the organization. It's not only focused on the PI data pertaining to the cloud environment. It's a holistic requirement standard. Now let's look at who should use them. That's a biggest question. 27018, it's particularly relevant to more on the cloud service provider or any organization outsourcing or storing the data in the cloud as well. Basically, if you're host or the processing the personal data in the cloud, 27018 provides the appropriate control for you. Now, 27701 is for the organization handling the personal data at a scale as well. This includes the company collect and manage the customer or the employee personal data, especially if operating in the jurisdiction of EU. So this standard is aligned with the GDPR. So this helps for the implementation. It's also certifiable standard as well. That's the biggest advantage what we have. Now the new standard, which is ISO 42000, it's established a very well established structured certifiable AI standard. This is the first standard for certification standpoint. This standard adopted in late 2023, and it's a framework for organization implement the policies and procedure and governance around the AI system. It primarily focus on the responsible development, deploying the use cases of AI models and ensuring the practices like risk assessment, bias mitigation, and also the transparency standpoint. So why 42001 matters in currently? So 42001 is important because it helps the organization to manage these AI specific risks. So that's one of the advantage because if you look at today, AI specific risk management, it's very less. So there is a guideline which has been released by ISO as well, 23894, which talks more about the risk assessment as well, which is a complement standard for 42001. So moving next, let's see the comparison between these standards. For example, it's important to recognize how all four framework can work together. The reason why we brought up this standard is suppose if an organization wants to go for all four frameworks, so you can understand the differences. So that's what the comparison table it's all about. 27,017, 18, and 27701, it's an extension of ISO 27001, as I told you earlier. By adding the cloud security and the cloud privacy, and the enterprise level privacy governance. So these three standards can address all these points. The only difference is the 42001 because it only focus on AI related one. But another key point here is that how these standards can be integrated. Currently, it can be integrated as well. For example, if any organization have the requirement pertaining to 18, 17, or 27701 and the AI management standpoint, I think integration is the best approach, what we recommend. And this allows the organization to streamline the audit, especially the audit, you will save a lot of time and also the duplication effort when it comes to the documentation standpoint. And also it gives a strong assurance to customers and the regulators as well when combined with a framework. Now, moving next on the decision metrics. So, the one of the important crux for today's discussion is that how do I select which standard is more applicable? Even though all four are good, but do I have a bandwidth enough to implement all four standards? That's always a question mark. So, let's understand the fundamental. So, we have come up with our own approach. It's called ISO Fit Pyramid standpoint. It's a conceptual model for aligning the ISO choices with various layers of the business. Think of this pyramid in three layers. The bottom layer, if you look at it, it's a foundation one, where it focuses more on the infrastructure, how our cloud or AI environment is built, and what technical step we rely on. That's what the infrastructure is. And we should then look at the cost and resource we can realistically commit. So if you see there that the arrow is towards the down arrow because we need to make sure that the cost wise we need to look into it. What is our budget? What is our capability standpoint before selecting any standard, and then the resource what we have, whether we can implement or not. Moving up with the pyramid, we should look at our industry and the type of the risk we commonly face, whether it's a privacy or the cloud security or AI governance standpoint. So because industry alignment is the most important, we look at what kind of industry we are in, whether we are in healthcare, we are in the finance sector, or we are the service providers. So industry alignment, risk type, it's the most important. Next, we should look at the regulatory pressures. For example, if you're a public listed company, of course, you have certain regulations which you need to follow, some legal requirement as well, which you need to adhere to. We should look at the regulatory that applies to the organization because often the guides which certification makes more sense. So that's where the regulatory comes into picture. The better the alignment across these layers, the ISO achievable, it's very easy. This is one of our pyramid structure we recommend using in your regular before selecting any ISO standpoint. Now let's look at the decision-making tree. For example, before it's all standards are pretty good, but also you should see that whether these standard makes it more relevant to your organization as well. So we have come up with the decision tree. This helps you to determine which ISO standard makes the most sense. But it is also important to remember that ISO 27001 is the foundation for any cloud or privacy extension, such as ISO 2701718 or 27701. So we should always start asking whether our focus is overall information security management. If that is the case, we should go for focus as that is your 27001 is your starting point of your journey. Then from there, we should also look at whether we are the cloud service provider, or let's say that you're heavily dependent on the cloud platform, and which justify adding ISO 27117 as well. So that if that's one of the standard you need to look into it as well. For an organization, need a broader privacy governance, and another extension to consider is 27701 as well. And if you are deploying or managing the AI related one, then go for 42001, because 421, as told earlier, it's a structured AI governance framework. In that way, this is a pretty good framework. So look at this decision tree. You should understand what you process, what you handle. If you're heavy cloud, it's simple terms. It's go for 27018. Along with that, if you have the PII information to be looked at, then go for 27018. And if you look at the legal and regulatory standpoint, anything needs to be adopted, then we recommend you to go for 27001 as well. So, and if you see the one of the AI standpoint, the guideline risk assessment standard is there, which is 23894. This is one of the really good technical standard with respect to how to do the risk assessment for an AI standpoint. This is what I recommend personally. Now let's look at even more details. So we looked at the decision tree right now. We know that how to navigate as well, but let's look at the industry's type as well. So that's the most important thing you need to look at. This 3x3 industry fit grid, this will help you as well. It's, for example, selecting which is ISO should be my primary, which one should be my secondary, and then the optional standpoint. So we should always understand what we do in the organization context, because that points as the primary ISO that best fits for our core operation standpoint. So from there, we need to layer into the secondary ISO based on the kind of data we handle, or our cloud or the SaaS footprints on it. So how much AI are we dependent on our environment standpoint? That is what you need to select as a secondary, or it may become as a primary as well. If you look at the SaaS, the cloud native, for them, 27017 is more applicable because there is a shared responsibility, and they also collect, if they collect PI information, then definitely they should go for 27018. And if they have major presence in the EU, then they should go for 27701 as well. So this is how you select the standard. Overall, this grid gives a clear roadmap. Is that what you need to choose as the first primary one, or what is your the base standard, in other words, that fits your sector? Then build out your compliance stack. In that way, you can reflect your data, technology, and the future decision standpoint. But as I told you, just one important thing for 27017 or 18 or 27701, 27001 implementation is mandatory. So moving next, we also thought let's discuss about the decision framework for CISO standpoint. So there are several factors to be considered before even looking at the organization or path standpoint. Given us the structure, the practical way you need to evaluate which ISO standard makes sense, and what is the value impact on the data integrity across the confidentiality CIA when we talk about. If you look at any standard, if you look at ISO standard, specifically talks about the CIA, which is confidentiality, integrity, and availability standpoint. So we should, look at these factors, from the regulation standpoint, the penalty standpoint, what we face if we don't implement. So that's where the factors, if you look at, the penalty, the cost, and time, these are the most important. And the best thing is that you start giving the weightage. As a CISO, you will have the direct access to the board, and you know that what are my focus areas currently. So always start giving the weightage for each and every factors, and then you can come up with the decision making. At Accorian, we generally work with our CISOs where we have our own internal formula before selecting which standard. So generally, we do the complete mathematics calculation. It's not that randomly we select this is good, this is bad. So basically, we understand our customers, what their industry fit is, what are the strategic values, what they operate, what are they exposed to, what are the legal and regulatory requirement standpoint. So at Accorian, we follow a simple weighted approach that looks at all these factors before we recommending any ISO standard. And in simple terms, you don't need to follow this formula, but this is the best practice what we follow in Accorian. But in general, it's very simple. You just add up your benefits, subtract with what are the challenges you have. Even you can come up with your own formula based on your organization. In simple terms, add up your benefits, subtract the challenges. That's gives you the best value for ISO standpoint. In general context, it's always important you look at your the legal and regulatory, because that's keeps changing as well. So that's the most important point, is where based on the industry change, how you can adapt as well. um, the key takeaway of what we recommend is that start with your industry and the infrastructure standpoint. Weigh your risk against the resource you realistically have. So that's the most important. In this formula, you will notice, the two things, which is penalty risk and the cost and the time standpoint. These two are negative. The reason, it's very simple why we consider this as negative, because penalty is basically it's the negative, because if we ignore certain requirement standpoint, we may face some legal or fines or any penalty standpoint. So that impacts our organization budget. So that's one of the reasons why we consider W6, which is penalty, as a negative one. So, because penalties never helps us, right? It adds pressure and reduce the our overall score as well. So, the same goes with the cost and time as well. So, if standard takes a lot of money and a lot of effort, or we simply don't have enough people in our in our team, so then the feasibility goes down. So considering these two factors, we have labeled it as a negative as well. So that's one of the reason. So if you subtract these two, you can make the final decision as well. So if any point of time, if anybody have any questions, feel free to ask me in the chat. So this is a most important crux of the today's discussion. How do you select, which is the best ISO? The benefits and the barriers of before taking any decision as well. So let's take a case study, on how exactly in Accorian we do as well. To ground this one, this is a real world case study from the Accorian experience standpoint. This is purely from our experience. We have come out with this formula. This example illustrates that how framework applies to specific company scenario standpoint. Today, this company is a SaaS platform running on AWS as an example. So the cloud security is already there. That's an important area. If they're hosted in AWS, that means they completely rely on the cloud environment. So they also handle the personal data as well across EU, US, and Canada. So that means which brings the strict privacy laws like GDPR, CCPA, or any other the Canadian privacy standard also comes into the picture as well. On top of that, if you see in this scenario, they also use the AI chatbot as well for customer support. So the AI risk and upcoming AI regulation also matters right now because recently EU AI Act also been released. So if you look at right now, the legal and regulator plays a heavy role as well. But if you look at their challenge right now is they have only two compliance person to implement all these standards. In other words, they can't chase every certificate at once. So this is a pretty much it's a complicated situation for them. You look at the scenario, they are heavily dependent on the cloud environment. They are processing the personal data. They are bound for the legal and regulatory standpoint, specifically EU and US standpoint. There is a AI usage as well, and AI Act, EU AI Act is also applicable stand right now. So let's look at calculation about how what we recommend to them, how exactly which ISO is recommend based on this scenario standpoint. So what we did the first is we started scoring each and every factors what we have identified. One is the industry fit. So when I say five, that means it's a perfectly aligned standard. We have taken 27018 as an example. We did this calculation for each and every standard. So in today's discussion, I'm just showcasing only one standard, which is 27018. And please, one important thing is that there are certain, this is completely high level. There are some other formulas as well, which is completely a proprietary component for our scoring algorithm as well. This is intentionally not shown. So on a high level, we are presenting it today. So the factors and the weightage, how do we look into is that each and every factors what we have labeled as scoring values. So each one was scored based on the factors like regulatory impact, customer expectations, or operational readiness, or risk standpoint, the cost and effort needed to implement this particular standard as well. So overall, because recently 27018, the standard got released, it's a 2025 version. Because as soon as the version gets changed, there is a lot of pressure for our customers. Specifically, they have to upgrade to the latest standard. So that gives more pressure for our customers. So that's where we evaluated this formula to make sure that where do we stand at. Um, when we calculate it overall, it comes under the 44. 44 means it's a good fit. That means because company handles a lot of the personal data in the cloud, the scoring was done on all the four. So which means that 27018 was the first among all. So they have to implement the standard. That's where what we recommended our customer to implement the standard. So this is one exercise what we generally do, which is the right ISO for my organization. These are the factors what we considered. Now, other important thing is that the implementation challenges. Okay, now I have decided that I want to go for 27018 as well. But what are the implementations standpoint? Even once you decide which ones are right, the another one is the execution is the significant effort. It becomes completely difficult to merge different control requirements and the amount of documentation needed, for all these standards. It can be overwhelming as well. So, and audit becomes because evidence is, if it is not organized, and there is a lot of overlap between the privacy, cloud, and even the AI control standpoint. So, we should make sure that we have a proper evidence management as well. On top of that, many companies have small teams, so the resources crunch, and it makes it even more tougher to keep with all the work, and especially implementing all these standards, even more challenge. And the most common what we have seen is the ownership across IT, legal, security, and it's not always clear because the responsibility matrix needs to be there. So that's been one of the challenge what we have seen. So, as a solution, what we have come up is we have come up with our own unified approach in Accorian. So, we make sure that we integrate all the standards. What are the common? What are the standards which can be similar to all these standards? We have come up with the unified governance and the control framework across all the requirement on the ISO standards. And when it comes to documentation standpoint, evidence management standpoint, we have our own in-house tool called Corico, and many of our customers are also using it. So, for example, if you provide one evidence for ISO 27001, which is similar requirement, let's take an example of management review meeting. There is a requirement in all the standards that you need to conduct a management review meeting. So that particular clause is mapped with other standards as well. So if you upload one evidence, that map to other. So that reduces the duplication standpoint, which Corico is able to do that one. So this makes the entire implementation or providing evidence smoother for our customer, and that's what we've been successful in managing the unified governance and control framework. Next, the key takeaway, different industry may prioritize different standards, but together you should have the common language. In other words, you look at your security requirements, privacy, and other AI risk management standpoint. Combining all standards not only improve your resilience. My suggestion is the integrated management system is always recommended one. It gives a complete strategic advantage as well. So I just see a few questions. I'm more than happy to take up a few questions. So I have a few questions which came to me right now. Just a second. Let me- The first question, okay. My team has come up with some rapid questions when it comes to the standard requirement standpoint. So do we need ISO 27001 before going for 27017 or 18 or even 27701? Yes. You should implement the 27001. These are the extensions rely on 27001. Next question, can we get ISO 42000 without ISO 27001? Yes, absolutely. ISO 42001 is a standalone, but integrating with the 27001 gives a better governance as well. Next is, if we store PI in the cloud, which ISO matters the most? If you're storing the PI information in the cloud, 27018 is the specific standard we need to go for it. And if you're using anything on the AI chatbot or 42001, it's an obvious one. You need to go for it. So any other questions? I'll pause for a minute. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to ask. Okay, I have one more question. What is the average timeline for 20 employees um, organized to achieve ISO 27001 from initial assessment to audit? Okay. So when it comes to 27001 implementation, typically it takes around, on an average of around, for 20 employees, it would be around 2 to 3 months, the initial implementation, and you also need to measure the effectiveness as well. So yeah, and the overall end of the cycle, it may go up to 4 months. Yeah. What are the key cost components involved in 27001 implementation consulting tools? Okay. When it comes to 27001, the common question would be is like the tools wise, the monitoring one, which would be little expensive, which you need to look into it. So, and other one is, the leakage prevention standpoint. How do you master data related one? So these are the some tools. It would be little expensive. So I don't know the exact value about it, but yeah, there are certain tools which you need to get procured as well. One more question. Can my organization get 27017 and 18 certified? Yes. That is a very good question, actually. Yes, I've been hearing it from many of them. One, because both are the cloud standards, and can I get certified both? But it depends on the requirement standpoint. Yes, the answer is very simple. Yes, you can go for it. Both can be certified, and but ISO 27001 is your base standard as well before going to 27018. And next question is that can you go back to the formula and explain the penalty risk again? Oh, sure. More than happy. All right. So again, I'll come back to the case study. So one question is that on the formulas, why subtract penalty and the cost effort over here? So I think I have detailed out here. So if you look at, there is positive and a negative standpoint, right? So if you look at the positive standpoint, you need to understand what are your organization, what exactly your strategic value. You will be giving all the value over there. But the biggest challenge would be is the penalty standpoint. As I explained you earlier, that especially penalties and a cost standpoint, what is the effort you require to implement those one? That becomes the biggest challenge for you. So that's where it's you're spending a lot of time on it, right? So that's where it is considered as the negative one as part of the calculation in our formula. And next question is, how do you keep the value on the percentage? Okay. Each factors how to you weightage as well. So it is absolutely it's your call on that. This is we generally keep this percentage from our expertise standpoint. It's not a mandatory that you have to give the exact value of 15%. It depends. For example, for certain people, the compliance risk is maybe very less. So it's up to the organization that what kind of scoring you want to give. So it's absolutely your call on it. And organization requirements, you can take it as well. So as I told you, for example, certain companies like penalty may not be applicable as well. So penalty risk is always a negative because if it is not applicable for your organization, then of course your scoring would be pretty much clear as well. Next question. Okay, yeah, this would be due to lack of time, I'm going to take one more question. So, uh, what was the main reason the SaaS customer in the case study need multiple standards? Okay. Yeah, if you look at here, when it comes to case study, they are heavily dependent on the cloud environment. One is, they faced the combination of the cloud risk, for example, AWS SaaS platform, because they are exposed to the legal privacy risk standpoint, EU, US, Canada. So they're all having all the PI information. Definitely, they're bound to go for these multiple standard as well. And most importantly, they're also using the AI chatbot as well. In the chatbot, in this particular context, they were using chatbot to get your all the information and provide a support standpoint. So um, they needed a structured method to prioritize all these standards that tackled the biggest risk. So that's where 27,118 came the most. So if you look at the overall value, it was about 44. And that was a recommended standard first. Yeah, of course, ISO 27001, it's a strong fit for them. It's they have to implement immediately. Above that, 27018. And then parallelly, the next one was the moderate was 42,001. So for this particular customer, what we did was ISO 27001 and 27018 and 27701. We implemented them, these standards right now. So that's all. Thank you so much. I think due to lack of time, I couldn't answer. I know there are a few more questions which is coming in. I'm more than happy, if you have any more questions. So please drop a mail to info@accorian.com. So I'm more than happy to understand, your question and respond to it. So to wrap up, the final message is that we always say that let Accorian take care of your security while you focus on your business. In conclusion, choosing and implementing the right ISO standard can seem complex, but with a strategic approach, always come out with a quantitative approach before selecting any standard. Understand your organization, industry type, and then you take a call about which standard is more relevant or more applicable for your organization standpoint. By leveraging these frameworks like ISO 27001, 718, and 2001, so you can mitigate the risk. But in the cloud environment, on AI standpoint, I highly recommend go for 42001 for risk assessment 23894. It's an amazing standard. It will help you to identify the risk pertaining to AI. And thank you so much for attending today's webinar and taking the time and understand how to choose the right ISO for cloud environment. And hope you guys understand. If more questions, feel free to contact me anytime. Thank you so much, everyone. Good night.